This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek and Pacifica. And today we're going to be talking with Mike Stout. He's a terrific labor musician, troubadour. He's also was a worker at the Homestead steel mill and a member of United Steelworkers there. He was an activist there. He's been an activist all of his life and fighting for justice, fighting for workers. And he was also in East Palestine at a national meeting around getting health care for the workers, the residents of East Palestine. So welcome to Workweek, Mike.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Always a pleasure.
So, Mike, this meeting with the residents and workers in East Palestine, you said that that's something you wanted to see for a long time, the coming together of union people, of residents, community people, and environmentalists. What did this conference mean to you, and what is it about it that can be replicated and built in many communities around the country and in unions?
It means the world to me because because of what it represented, and for the last I would say 2 decades or more, we've had a serious division and walls coming down, dividing working people up, rural versus urban, Democrats versus Republicans versus independents. Like this person against that person, union against non-union. But this rural-urban divide and the political divide has been the worst. Well, we have a situation here in East Palestine, Ohio, where all the issues that have been dividing us, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the environment, whether it's labor unions and workers' rights and health and safety, those walls don't exist there because they're all the same people. The workers are in the unions, are the citizens that live there, and the ones getting denied health care and the people getting screwed. So they don't care. Those people don't care in East Palestine what you are or what you call yourself or what party you're from or what union you're from or not from. All they care about is you're there helping them. You're there at their side, fighting the fight with them. And I have not seen that happened for a long, long time, where environmentalists, environmental organizations, unionists and union and labor organizations, community organizations, and healthcare advocates all came together in one fight for one cause. And that is the way forward. Class is, I had a question. We were at a meeting today, and George Waxmunski from the United Electrical Workers, he said, well, all right, Mike, we know what all the divisions are. What's our class? What are we aiming for? And I said, we're aiming for our class down here at the bottom, taking on that class up at the top. And that class up at the top is Norfolk Southern and the government that has sided with Norfolk Southern. And we're going to take them on, and we're going to build a movement, and we're going to piss in their ear, and we're going to shit on their porches, and we're going to hand out flyers and educate people till we stop breathing. They think we're going to go away. They think that they can come in and promise these people the world, which they did. They went to East Palestine. Biden went to East Palestine. Sherrod Brown, they all went there, and they promised these people they were going to get them help as of last summer. And 40 congresspeople signed on to a resolution to enact the Stafford Act, which is a law that the president doesn't even need Congress for. The president can declare places like East Palestine a disaster, and he can use it. He can use that law to give those people aid and to help them, whether it's evacuating the area, finding them a place to live, getting them the health care they need, the food they need, or whatever. He can do that without Congress. He has the power to do that, and he's not doing it. For whatever reason, he went there and he promised the people he met with that he was going to do that, and they've never heard a word since. And those people can't wait for lawsuits that take 5-10 years down the road. They can't wait for somebody to step up after the election this November. They can't wait for that. Half of them will probably be dead by then. They need help now, and we need to figure out how to mobilize as many people as we can in as many parts of this country as we can to raise their voice in unison and let this government know they need to step up and help these people.
And the issue of healthcare, basic human right. There are millions of people who are dependent on their jobs. If they lose their jobs, they lose their healthcare in this country. But in the case of East Palestine, these people are actually been poisoned by vinyl chloride. And you had the EPA sending out a notice saying that everything was fine. They didn't see any problem with the vinyl chloride. These agencies seem to have been captured by the very companies they're supposed to regulate.
That's exactly right. The agencies have been captured, and we know that, and you know that, and I know that, and we will act accordingly. And acting accordingly means we've got to do everything we can to let them know we are going to be flies on their back till they get these people help, and we ain't going away.
And their national unions, there was a letter sent to the Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO, for the AFL-CIO to support it. The Stafford Act, so these people can get health care. These workers there are members of the unions, the Ohio Nurses Association. They're in the Bricklayers Union. There are many unions that these workers are members of, yet it seems these unions nationally have been silent about the fact that these working people, residents, their own members are losing their health care because they haven't been able to work because they're sick because of the poisoning.
And just so people know, the Stafford Act is a law that allows the president to step in and declare this an emergency disaster area. And the president can instruct FEMA, and we all know who FEMA is, to go in and evacuate those people, get them a decent place to live, get them health care, and get them what they need, because this is something that happened through no fault of their own. And the government, people like the people in East Palestine and places like Uniontown and Pipetown and Treasure Island and all these Cancer Alley sites, we're all sick and tired of sitting down and watching the news every night, and they're plumbing out 16 billion here, 50 billion there for all these endless wars and all these places overseas, and then they can't take care of their own people here. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? And how do you think that makes people feel? How do people out there think the people in East Palestine feel when they see all the billions and billions of dollars going to not only overseas, but I'm talking tax breaks for the rich. All this money's going up and out, but none of it's going down where it's needed.
And you've written a book, Homestead Steel Mill, The Final 10 Years, USWA Local 1397, and the Fight for Union Democracy. What does union democracy have to do with this fight? And how did you get involved in the steel mill, end up at the steel mill?
Well, I just had a stroke of luck. I was working a shit job. I was a craneman working a shit job at American Standard plant. And a friend of mine called me up, and he had a friend that lived in Pittsburgh who worked at the Clairton Works. And he said, "Hey, Mike," and every time he called me, all I would do is piss and moan about how hard I was working and how little I was getting paid. And he says, "Well, they're hiring up at the steel mills in Pittsburgh, and they'll pay 2-3 times as much as you're making." So I went, hot damn, and I went up there and I put applications in the Duquesne Works, the Irvin Works, and the Homestead Works, and I got hired at Homestead within 3 weeks. This was 1977, and this was 77, 78, and early 79 were the last major hiring binge that U.S. Steel did before the walls caved in. So when I got hired at Homestead, I probably wasn't there 2 or 3 months when I realized I had landed right in the middle, smack in the middle of a big rank and file rebellion against the international union leadership. And basically what the argument was the rank and file and the members at the bottom had no voice. We weren't allowed to vote on our contracts. Our grievances were never taken seriously. They'd go to second step and disappear. People had no representation. They had no voice. So we ran a slate, a rank and file slate on union democracy, on we want the right to ratify our contracts, on we want the members who file their grievances to be part of the grievance procedure, that we want the members who are part of the union and paying union dues to be involved in the union and their own fight, helping themselves. So we won by a landslide, 3-1. And then the International spent the next, I'd say 4 years, 5 years, doing everything they could to get us out of office. And every time they'd attack us, we'd get stronger. Every time they'd attack us, we'd win 4-1, 5-1. I became first a what you call an assistant grievance man, which would be a steward. And then a chief steward. I became a zone grievance man. And then I became the chief grievance person for the entire mill. And I fought my cases, unlike most unions and other locals in the steelworkers. They had this archaic grievance procedure that was 5 steps. It could take anywhere from 2 to 7 years to get a grievance to arbitration. They had one guy handling the grievance at first step, then another grievance man at second step, then third step, the chairman of the grievance committee, then at fourth step, the business agent from the International who didn't even know the grievance or the grievance. And then by the time, if it did get to arbitration, they didn't even know what they were talking about. So what we did is we revamped the whole system when we went in, and I took over and I handled my grievances from first to fifth all the way to arbitration. And on a high school education, I learned a very short period of time how to take U.S. Steel's 3-piece suit lawyers, 6-figure salary lawyers, and chew them up for lunch and spit them out. And I ended up, when the mill shut down, winning approximately $12 million for 3,000 workers who were screwed out of their pensions and severance pay and back pay. So that was kind of my introduction into a real unionism and a real rank and file democracy. And our local, we had a badass president, and he was a Golden Gloves boxer when he was a kid. He didn't take shit off anybody. He was an eye for an eye guy. If the company screwed him and gave him time off, the company guy got sugar in his gas tank. If he gave him more time off, he got a scrape on his car on the way out to work. Our union, we taught people not only how to fight, but why to fight and why to stand up for their rights.
And one of the things that people are angry about in this country is the deindustrialization. Towns and communities have been destroyed. These factories have moved away. And the Democrats and Republicans blame the Chinese, blame other countries. But why is it that the steel mills closed down in this country?
The steel mills closed down in this country because we had a bunch of greedy corporate bastards running them, and they didn't give 2 diddly squats about steel making or steel workers. And what they did is they spent 30 years patching up broken equipment, patching up and shutting down mills piece by piece and raking as much money as they could. And then when they raked as much money as they could, come in Ronald Reagan and deindustrialization. They then not only deindustrialized, but they basically took their money that we had made for them over 5-6 decades and started investing in oil, in real estate, in steel making overseas. And they led the charge. When the steel industry in this country was allowed to be in our manufacturing base, deindustrialized and the jobs shipped overseas, that was the end for America. And I told people that at the time. We formed an organization called the Tri-State Conference on Steel. And what we did is we had a coalition that was incredible, like nothing you probably ever seen before. We had the townspeople on our side. We created our own industrial authority called the Steel Valley Authority that encompassed 9 boroughs plus the city of Pittsburgh. We had the unions, at least at the local and district level on our side. We had every state representative on our side. We had every city council person on our side. We had all the townspeople on our side. Well, you know who we didn't have on our side, Steve? Wall Street. So we devised a plan to save the mills that were salvageable, that could be salvaged and that could be modernized. And we created an entire new ownership proposal. Our ownership proposal included the workers, a third, the public sector, a third, and the private sector a third. And the private sector were the people who were buying the steel. They were people who had a vested interest in seeing the mill stay operate. So we had a new form of ownership. We had new labor relations. We had new proposals for new equipment, for combining parts of different mills that could go together and be productive and compete. And we had all that, and we got the support of everybody. We even had the support of our senators, Hines and Specter at the time. And you know what? It didn't matter, Steve, because when all was said and done and we needed to go and get the money to modernize the mill and start it up again, Wall Street redlined us. And basically, we were blackballed, and Wall Street, through this banking firm called Lazard Frères, basically cut us out and refused to not only lend us the money, but U.S. Steel then signed an agreement with all the people that were scrapping, the companies that were scrapping their mill. They signed an agreement with those people and said when they sold off parts of the mill and scraps of the mill, they weren't allowed to sell it to anybody that was going to compete with U.S. Steel. So, we were pretty much screwed. And when you get to the point where you're up against Wall Street, Steve, you need an army. You need an army in the streets. And unfortunately for us, our army was gone. Our army was dead. Our army was dispersed in a diaspora all across the United States. We lost 150,000 manufacturing jobs in 6 years in just the Monongahela Valley around Pittsburgh. All of those people, especially the young, there was no jobs in Pittsburgh. They all left, and they went to, there's not a state in the Union. I defy anybody to find one state in the Union where there's not dozens of Homestead steelworkers from Hawaii to Maine. And, you watch a football game, a lot of people like, I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, and, you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers and they play all these teams, in San Diego and LA, and the announcers get on TV and they go, "Oh my Lord, look at this. We got as many Pittsburgh Steeler fans here as we do Los Angeles fans. Boy, these Steeler fans really travel well." No, they don't travel well, Steve. They live there. They moved there because they didn't have any jobs in Pittsburgh anymore. And you have places like Louisville, Kentucky, and Detroit, Michigan, and LA and Las Vegas. They have as many, anywhere from 3 to 5 Steeler bars. There are bars dedicated just to people who want to go watch the Steelers. So that's what they did to the steel industry. That's what they did to the manufacturing base in America. And they thought they were going to turn our country into this consumer finance-based thing where all we do is give everybody credit cards and let them consume, and we'll have our production, our manufacturing, and our steelmaking overseas with cheap slave labor in China, in the Philippines, and all these different places. Well, guess what? Now those places have the manufacturing base, and we don't have it. We don't even have enough of a manufacturing base to defend our own country if it was attacked. That's what we've done to the United States, and the people from Ronald Reagan to Clinton to Bush on forward should be held accountable for what they've done to this country. And if people out there think that I'm just blowing smoke, well, come here sometime, and I'll show you what U.S. Steel did to these towns out here. When I came to work for U.S. Steel in the Monongahela Valley, U.S. Steel had 7 plants. They employed 30,000 people. Well, guess how many they have now? A little under 3,000. So that means 90% of the steel industry was eliminated in this area. 90%. These towns are skeletons and shopping malls. That's all they are. And that's what they've done to this country. They turned it into a giant shopping mall, and everybody's in debt up to their ears.
And the role of the unions, the national unions, the steel workers, the auto workers, they supported Clinton, they supported the Democrats, but weren't the Democrats actually passing NAFTA and allowing the deindustrialization of America?
Clinton was, they brought in Bill Clinton exactly to do what he did, and that's get NAFTA shoved through. That's get the omnibus crime bill shoved through to eliminate the What's that law, Steve, that allows the banks to go invest anywhere they want? And he basically, Clinton was their hitman. In fact, every time the ruling class wants to get something done in this country, they bring in a Democrat because they know the working people can't stand the Republicans. So they bring in a Democrat to do their dirty work. And that's what they did with Clinton. They brought him in. Then when the masses were in an uproar and ready to hang the Wall Street bankers in the 2008, they brought in Obama. And what did Obama do? Calmed everybody down, said, I'll take care of it. And the only people he took care of was the bankers. He didn't take care of any of the millions of people who lost their houses, whose lives fell apart, whose families split up. All he took care of was the bankers. And people out there, if you want to dispute what I'm saying, go back and look. Start at the beginning. Go back to Ronald Reagan. I don't care. Start with Clinton and go forward from Clinton to Bush to Obama to another Trump, and then you got Biden. And take all those presidents and go look at who their advisors are, who their chief staffers are. They're all the same people. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Guarantee Trust, all these big Wall Street bankers are the same advisors and the same people that work for both parties. And all they do is just change tactics, good cop, bad cop. That's the game they play with working people.
And in our lifetime, we haven't had a working class movement in this country. The last time was in the 30s and 40s when there were mass workers. There were general strikes in San Francisco and Minneapolis. Workers occupied factories to organize them. That's why these GM and these big companies were forced to recognize unions. It seems like the business union approach of the AFL-CIO of these unions is not working because companies are saying, to hell with the laws, they're not going to unionize, and they're turning people over quickly so they can't organize them very well. Building a working class movement in this country is probably going to be necessary, absolutely necessary, if we're going to organize millions of workers. Isn't that the case?
Not only is it the case, but that movement's not going to happen until we get some union officials who are willing to stand out, and speak up for the working class and call for a general strike. We are living under a dictatorship of criminals, and they don't care about the law. They don't care about us, and they don't care about anything but the almighty dollar and making as much profit as they can. And, Steve, I noticed, like, when the Iraq War, before the Iraq War came, labor was having all these big rallies. And if you remember, in 1991, we had 500,000 people in D.C. And, there was all this activity going on. And then after 9/11, the Iraq War happened. Well, there was like millions and millions and millions of people in the street. Do you think the ruling class cared? Do you think they cared if there's 5 million? Well, I'll tell you what they would care is if we shut this country down. That's the only thing that's going to get their attention, is shutting this country down. Until that happens, until the working class stands up. And I'm so tired of hearing, I've been hearing this my whole life. I heard it back in 1983. There was a guy, he was the head of the Machinists Union, named Bill Wimpensinger. I think I pronounced his name right. And he was speaking at a conference I was singing at in Pennsylvania. And after he spoke, and he came off the stage, I was on the side there, and I pulled him over and I said, "Hey, Bill, I want to ask you a question. Why didn't you people in the AFL-CIO pull the labor movement out when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers? And you know what he said to me? He said, "Well, we couldn't do that." He says, "Because we don't have, they would have just fired us all. They would have we didn't have the power to do that." I said, "Well, how are you going to know if you have the power to do anything if you don't do it? How are you going to know until you step out if somebody's going to step out with you? If you don't step out, they're not going to step out. And if our leaders don't step out and stand up, then people aren't going to, they're not going to." And I think what's happened, though, in the United States is a lot of people, working people, are on to this type of business unionism. And I think you saw that in 2018 and 2019 when the teachers from West Virginia and the teachers from Colorado and California, and they didn't wait for the unions. They went out on strike. They said, oh, the unions, you don't want to lead this? You're afraid you're going to get fined. You're afraid this. We'll do it. And they went out and the unions followed. And I think that's what's going to take again. I think we need new leadership. We need young leadership that's going to step up to the plate and understand what we're up against. If you don't understand that we're living under a dictatorship of criminals, these people are criminals, these corporate bastards, and they don't care about the law, and they don't care about the environment, and they don't care about people. All they care about is making more money for themselves. And until people understand that our interests are not their interests, and their interests are going to do nothing but make our lives miserable, as soon as we come to that understanding, then we'll know what to do. And you know what that is? Cut them off. We don't need them, Steve. This society does not need these billionaire, trillionaire, because they are nothing but leeches. That's all they are. I mean, during that last downturn in the economy, during COVID, what did they give us? $1,200? Well, guess what they gave the billionaire class? First off, there was 125 more billionaires created in just 3 years during COVID. And now we have 457 billionaires in this country. And guess what they raked in during COVID? $7 trillion. $7 trillion. And we can't get Medicare for the people in East Palestine. And then people, like, when I get enraged about that, go, oh, Mike, what are you? You're out of control, Mike. You better calm down here. You better. Oh, there goes Mike again on his soapbox. Oh God. You know what they call me, Steve? They call me Debbie Downer, because, like, whenever you talk about the truth and you talk about these dictatorship corporate assholes that are screwing our lives up, whenever you talk about that, you're a Debbie Downer when you talk about the truth. And they can call me whatever name they want, Steve, but as long as I got legs, I'm going to get on that soapbox and I'm going to sing and I'm going to talk and I'm going to spout the truth to whoever wants to listen.
And you've been singing, and you've got some great songs that you've done, including one for a general strike. How did you get into singing labor songs and get into music, workers' music? Because that is an important part of culture in our country and our society internationally, not just in this country.
Well, I actually was a singer before I was in the labor movement. I moved to New York City when I was 18 years old, and wanted to be like I wanted to be a songwriter, a singer-songwriter like Bob Dylan, and he was my hero at the time. Him and Phil Oakes were my two biggest heroes at the time, as far as folk singing. Pete Seeger and that crowd, I loved them too, but they were old school. I like the newer people that were, like Phil Oakes was one of the people that formed the Yippies with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. And I like that, and Dylan was just Mr. Anarchist. You never know what he was going to do, but they were my role models at the time. So I went and I moved to New York City, and I got a record contract with Roulette Records when I was 19 years old, and got signed on. And but one thing led to another, and I realized what kind of corrupt organization I had signed on with. I didn't even when somebody pointed out to me my business agent was taking 25% of everything I made, and started looking into it. I basically moved to California till my contract broke, and then when I moved back to New York after my manager, who was in the mob, he was a criminal. He was in jail. Once I already went to jail, I moved back to New York City, and when I moved back to New York City, I got a job in a picture frame factory down in Soho. And there was about 150 people that worked there. And the Teamsters walked in there one day, and I was the only English speaking white person that worked there. The rest were immigrants. The rest were people of color, mostly Latino, from all countries in Latin and South America. And one day this Teamster guy walked in, and the bosses called us all to the middle of the floor. And the Teamster guy announced, he says, I just want everybody here to know you're in the union. And being a loudmouth radical like I was, but hey, bud, says, what are you talking about? We're in the union. He said, you're in the union, you're in the Teamsters, you're going to be paying dues, your boss will take it out. And then he turned to my boss and he went, make that guy the shop steward. I like people that speak up, open their mouths. So when a Teamster guy left, I went up to Albert, the guy that was my boss. I went up to him and said, what the fuck was that all about? And he goes, that's real simple, Mike. He said, if we didn't join the union, the Teamsters were going to make sure no supplies got delivered to our shop. Steve, that's what we need today. I mean, you can call that gangsterism, call it whatever you want, but back then, people joined the union. I mean, and it was corrupt. As well as I do, the Teamsters were pretty damn corrupt. But that was my introduction to unionism and to the labor movement. And from the Teamsters, I then went to the Steelworkers Union and landed in the position I related to you earlier. So that's I always, from the beginning, back to when I was 20, 21 years old, wrote songs about whatever movement I was in, whatever people I was dealing. If I was in the anti-war movement, I wrote anti-war songs. Labor movement, I wrote labor songs. Environmental movement, I wrote environmental songs. And I wrote many songs. I like to write songs about people in this country who made history, labor union people who made history, working people, but nobody knows about them. Nobody's heard a word about them. If you go through my 150 to 175 songs I've written, I got 18 CDs out. There's people on there who you've never heard of. Like most people out there that I ask, they've never heard of Crystal Eastman. Had you ever heard of Crystal Eastman before I told you about her? Nobody has. Well, Crystal Eastman wrote the first workers' compensation law in the history of the world, not just the United States. She co-founded the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She co-wrote the first Equal Rights Amendment. This woman probably did more than any 1,000 men you'll read about in your history books, yet nobody's heard about her. Nobody's heard about Martin Delaney. Martin Delaney was an African-American who taught himself. He was a doctor. He was a lawyer. How could he read or write? He was a lawyer. He had his own newspaper. He ran the Underground Railroad through Pittsburgh, and basically gave a speech when they passed the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. He got up in front of 10,000 people and gave a speech that says, any slave owner tries to come in my house and pull anybody out of my house, whether they're a slave, free or not, he says, either they will die or I will die. And then he looked at the governor of Pennsylvania and said, and that includes President Gilmore, President of the United States. Well, they ran him out of town. He had to flee to Canada because they put a marker out on him. So he had to flee to Canada. Well, when the Civil War started and the North was having a problem winning the war, and Mr. Abraham Lincoln passed a Declaration Proclamation. Guess what he did? He went and got Martin Delaney out of Canada to come down and be his highest ranking black officer in the Union Army, because Martin Delaney knew the Underground Railroad like the back of his hand. Who's heard of Martin Delaney? Nobody. So all my songs are about people like that, whether they're still alive or not, people that are making history, working people, and people that have died making history that nobody's heard about. So I like to write about people. I like to write about causes and struggles, and I write love songs too. I've written 5 love songs for my wife. I write, I depending on what the cause is and what catches my interest at the time, that's the type of song I write. But it was a no-brainer when I got introduced to the East Palestine struggle and met Chris Albright and some of the workers there that were injured and harmed. Writing a song about them was a no-brainer, and it was one of the easiest songs I had to write and put together and record. So I love doing it. It's an art, and it's not something that happens by magic. Writing a song is a lot of work. Recording a song is a lot of work. Learning to sing a song in front of large and small crowds takes a lot of work. It's something I've crafted and learned how to do over the last 50 years of my life.
And also, you are in a town where Ann Feeney used to live. And, I went to my CWA convention. I'm in the Journalist Union News Guild. And I expected that Ann Feeney would be singing there as well as yourself, well-known labor musicians. They wouldn't they wouldn't have you. They wouldn't have Ann. I mean, I asked, what's going on, Ann? In Pittsburgh, where you have labor musicians, and my union, CWA, wouldn't hire them for a convention. They brought in people from outside.
Yep.
And you had an experience with your songs. You talked about the war in your songs, and all of a sudden, you're not getting jobs.
Well, that's pretty much what happened was from about 1995 through 2000, 2001. My band, and Ann too, Ann was the president of the local musicians union, 6471 here. Ann brought me into the musicians union. I was a performer and kind of performing, but not doing it professionally, because I was working in the mill. I was a grievance man. And Ann, when the mill shut down and I lost my job, and Ann approached me and she said, "Hey, Mike, you need to join the musicians union." So she brought me in, and I formed a band, and I organized them all into the union. And between 1995 and 2001, I pretty much played almost every major international convention. I played the Steelworkers twice in Vegas. I played the AFL-CIO, the UMWA. I played SEIU convention opening for Earth, Wind, and Fire in Pittsburgh at the Civic Arena. So we were a hot to trot. And then all of a sudden, 2001 happens, and I start writing songs about the war, against the war in Iraq. And then fracking starts, and I start writing songs about the environment. And the next Steve, I'm persona non grata in the labor movement because I was writing songs about other causes and other stuff that was going on. And that's the problem with the labor movement. They don't, a lot of the labor leaders, they have this circle the wagons mentality where I'm going to protect my members, which is good. I'm going to protect my members and kind of screw everybody else. I don't care about anything else. And that's what's got us into the hole we're in until we have the concept that the IWW put forward over 100 years ago, one big union. And one big union doesn't necessarily mean you all have to have one place you're paying your union. One big union means everybody joining together in one cause. And that cause is the cause of working people and the cause of social justice and the cause of this country. Working people built this country. You know it and I know it, Steve. The rich didn't build it. All the rich did is make money off of our building this country. And now they took what we gave them after 6-7 decades and took their money and ran, went overseas, went to their plush bank accounts in Cayman Islands and Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. They've stored, they can't even guess. When they tried to guess how much money that was ripped off during the past 2 decades since 2001, it's somewhere between 12 and 21 trillion dollars. They're not sure, how much money they ripped off. But could you imagine what we could do in this country with just $1 trillion? We could provide housing for the 800,000 homeless. People could have enough to eat. Everybody could have a decent job with a decent income, and you wouldn't have the issues of crime and drug addiction and crime and all that stuff happening mainly in communities where people don't have jobs. People don't have communities, that have infrastructure support. You look at you go to all these little towns where fentanyl is rampant and the drug addiction is rampant. It's all these little towns like Huntington, West Virginia, all these places that used to be factory towns. And when I had my union print shop after the mill shut down for 25 years, while I was also singing professionally, I had a union print shop, and we had a pretty brisk silk screening operation going. And when I started the silk screening, I had called a friend of mine in the ILGWU down in Tennessee and asked him to turn me on to some union shops that made T-shirt material and hats and all that kind of stuff. And he sent me a catalog, Steve. It was about a half an inch thick. And it was just list page after page of union shops, mostly down south. So I ended up picking out 8 or 9 shops where I was getting my t-shirt material and hat material and all that stuff from. And it was like great. I mean, I had so many places to choose from. If somebody needed their stuff tomorrow, I could call a shop up and get there overnighted and get it silk screened and get it to them in 2 days. Like when Labor Day came, I was silk screening for a lot of the unions. The steelworkers, well, guess what happened? Clinton signs NAFTA in late 1993, early 1994, when my silk screening business picks back up after the winter break. And I start calling all of these shops to get my material. Every single one of them were closed. Their material was now coming from Guatemala, from El Salvador, from Mexico. In one fell swoop, Clinton wiped out hundreds, if not thousands, of shops in rural, small towns throughout the United States, and nothing replaced them. Do you know what replaced them? Fentanyl. You know what replaced them? People like Hillary Clinton calling them deplorables. That's what replaced them. And the Democratic Party wants to know why they have no allegiance and why they have nobody that gives a shit about them out in the rural areas of the United States. Go back and look what Clinton did with NAFTA and look what he did to those towns, and you'll have your answer.
And, you know, the Democrats are touting giving billions to Ukraine, giving billions to Israel. In fact, they had some Congress people saying you should vote for it because we got armaments factories in your district. This is jobs. And yet you have a situation in which the railroads can't even run without derailments. You had the wreck in Baltimore days after we had the conference in East Palestine, where the ship, a Maersk contracted ship, runs in, breaks down a bridge. The infrastructure is falling apart. You don't have a mass public transportation system in this country, but it seems like wars are the only thing that capitalism in the United States can provide. More wars and repression.
Not only that, Steve, but again, think how you would feel in a place like East Palestine or Uniontown or Pipetown or Treasure Island, it doesn't matter, where something happens through no fault of your own, you can't get no help, and then you're sitting there watching these billions and billions and billions of dollars go out the door to some endless war, not only to some endless war, but some endless war we never, ever will win. People don't understand that. When we forfeited our manufacturing base, we forfeited our ability to even defend our country. And so what's happening is we're spending all this money on endless wars. And I ask people out there, how many wars have we won, by the way, since World War II? Name me one war. We lost in Vietnam. We lost in Iraq. We lost in Afghanistan. And we're losing in Ukraine. And we're taking this money, and it's like literally like throwing money down the toilet. And we got people over here in need. And you know what Russia and China have been doing while we're spending our endless trillions of dollars? Because I don't know if people know it, but just in the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war, we spent $2 trillion. Well, you know what Russia and China were spending their money on while we were manufacturing? High-speed trains. Like the Russians and the Chinese now have high-speed freight trains that run thousands of miles. They spent their money on building up their infrastructure. They spent their money on building up their economy and getting people a decent, and what do we spend our money on? War. And what did we get for it? Nothing. I mean, that song, War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. I think that song needs to be rehashed and replayed.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is, in our unions, the SEIU just announced they're going to give $200 million to Biden and the Democrats. It seems like there's unlimited money, not for education, not for labor communication, not for labor music and culture, but for the Democrats. Like the Democrats are going to save us from Trump and from fascism.
And meanwhile, we have fascism already, in my opinion. I mean, when you have people monitoring every word you say through your phone or your TV or a computer, that's fascism. When you have anybody that steps out of line, that steps off script, off the mainstream narrative, they get blackballed, they get canceled, censored. That's fascism. Fascism is just all military, stuff like you had in Nazi Germany. Fascism, modern day fascism knows how to use technology to monitor us, to divide us, to cancel us, and so on and so forth. We've got to create, the people, and it's happening. We've got to create our own independent network and way of communicating with each other. We've got to create our own system for meeting the needs of people, whether it's food, whether it's housing, or whatever, because these people running the show don't care. They don't. You know what they care about, Steve? I'll tell you what, they didn't care if there's nuclear war. They really think we can win it. There's 2 Congress people in just the past week who have come out publicly and said about Gaza, just nuke them. I mean, think how crazy that is. Here's Gaza right in the middle of Israel. And some congressman from the U.S. who gave nuclear weapons and technology to Israel is standing back saying, he's saying nuke Israel. I mean, and plus he doesn't understand what the repercussions are of a nuclear explosion going off in today's day and age with the type of weaponry, nuclear weapons they have. I mean, you're talking about nuclear winters. You're talking about destruction and havoc and starvation and deprivation like we've never seen. And you got these fools in Congress calling for it. I mean, this is the craziest psychopathic government I've ever seen in my life. And the only one worse than ours is the one that's running Israel right now. I mean, and for Biden to come out and mealy mouth and tell the American people, oh, Putin, Netanyahu's a bad man, and Putin's an evil man, and blah blah blah. And then he turns around at the same time, he's like, naughty and Netanyahu for killing journalists, for killing, destroying hospitals, for killing aid workers, and so on and so forth. At the same time, he's chewing them out for doing it. He's giving them more weapons and more bombs to do it. The very same day that he came out and denounced Netanyahu for killing those 7 aid workers 2 days ago, the same exact time he was sending thousands of 2,000-pound bombs and F-16 fighters over to Israel, to their government. How do you feel when you're in a town where everybody's abandoned you, nobody gives a shit about you, you can't get help for nothing? You can't get help for fixing your road, for fixing your bridge, for doing anything, and you're sitting there watching this money getting poured down the sewer like that. I think the American people are getting to the point where they've had enough, but I think what they need is they need leadership. They need people to step up to the plate because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are bought and paid for. All you got to do is look at the same lobbyists, whether it's the fossil fuel industry, with the medical industry, whatever complex you want to call it. It's the same people that are, funding both parties. They're not going to do what we say. They're going to do what their funders say. And until we create our own party, our own organization that's independent of all that bullshit, he says we're never going to get anywhere in this country. And what we're going to end up doing is fending for ourselves. And you know what fending for ourselves is going to end up? We're going to be I think their goal is to bring us to Mad Max Fury Road myself. I don't know if you ever saw a Mad Max movie, but it's dystopian. Everybody's just out looking out for themselves. And Mad Max kind of puts this little group finally that collectively comes together. But I think these people want a Mad Max. I really think they do. And you know what they do, Steve? They don't care because they've got in Colorado and Virginia and these places in the world, they got these underground bunkers that are supplied with enough food and water to last them for years. And then on top of that, I don't know if you heard, but up in South Dakota, North Dakota, you had all these silos. They were nuclear silos that were emptied out, when they upgraded their nuclear thing. Well, you know what they're doing now? They're selling those silos as bunkers for the rich at $70,000 a clip in the event there's a nuclear war. They're buying these bunkers and supplying them. So the rich think they don't care if the world's destroyed. They think they're somehow going to be saved from it. There's some kind of, it's not going to touch them. Well, they got another thing coming.
Well, you also have AI, artificial intelligence, robots at UPS. They're laying off thousands and thousands of workers. The union leadership, Sean O'Brien, is refusing to rally, say anything. They're in bed with UPS. And Goldman Sachs said that 350 million workers may lose their jobs as a result of AI. All the money that's coming into San Francisco from these billionaires is to get more AI in so you can get rid of supermarket clerks. You can get rid of workers in hospitals. You can get workers in grocery stores, eliminate the working class. Isn't that a contradiction of capitalism? They want to eliminate the workers and have machines take over the work, but there's nothing future for the workers. And the workers are the ones that provide
Yep.
consumers.
But it just goes to show you how stupid they are. I mean, even Henry Ford recognized that if he didn't pay his workers halfway decent salary, there was going to be nobody to buy his freaking cars. How do these people think we're going to be able to purchase or do anything, when they eliminate our ability to like earn a living? I mean, it's just, and that's another thing is we have in the United States alone, this is just our consumer debt. This is not companies and institutions and corporations. Our consumer debt, people like us, is now over $1 trillion in this country. $1 trillion. I mean, everybody I know is in debt up to their ears. And what kind of future is that? And the people like that are bringing in AI, they don't think about things like that. All they think about is, oh boy, I'm eliminating a worker. I'm going to make more money. And they don't care what happened to the worker they eliminated. And it's the same thing with the wars. They go in and they launch a war, and they don't realize there's repercussions, when they launch a war. They don't realize that, when you do one act, another, when you kill and murder a Palestinian over there, you know what you do, Steve? You create 100 more Palestinians in the future that are going to want to kill you because you killed them and their family. And every time we do that, every time we go into these wars, all we are doing, and all Israel is doing for that matter, their government, is creating a world that hates them, that wants to get back at them, that wants to have nothing to do with them. And we, the United States, are allowing our government to pave the way for our own demise. And until we stand up, until people stand up and put their egos aside and put their little cushy little whatever they got, their little union thing aside, until we put those silos aside and become one big silo, we're not going to be heard, and they're not going to listen to us. And I know I've always been a street person, Steve. I always go out in the street and demonstrate, but we need more than demonstrations. Demonstrations, the Iraq War showed, they don't care. And besides, not only do they not care, but they got a new way of dealing with us, and people better wake up and look at what they did to the working people and the truck drivers up in Canada. Because what they're doing, the central banks now, is they're consolidating all of our information into one location, so that if somebody goes on strike and they order you to go back to work and you don't go back to work, they cut your bank account off. They cut your spending off. They did that to the truckers. They did it over in India. They've done it in 3 or 4 other places. Somebody's doing something they don't like, they just cut your spend. Not only did they cut the truckers' bank accounts off, but all the people that were donating to PayPal to the trucker cause up there, they cut their bank accounts off too. And they now have figured out how to control people to the max, and that's controlling your bank account. They'll dictate what food you can eat, how much you can eat, where you can go, who you can talk to. That's fascism. And that's happening right under our noses. And just because we're at the beginning of it doesn't mean it ain't happening.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for joining in this discussion, Mike, and particularly focus on the workers, the residents of East Palestine, because if we can't get them health care when they've been poisoned by Norfolk Southern, then what does it say about the people in this country, the working people of this country? So I think that focus is critical, and it's a way of saying to all workers, the right to health care is a basic human right, and it's only because of this system that we have to struggle even for health care for the people of East Palestine.
Steve, I will be standing with the people of East Palestine till they're not standing. When they're dead, that's when I'll be gone. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to have their backs, and I know you will too. And our goal is to get as many thousands of people as we can to have their backs. We've got to take a stand, and East Palestine is the place to do it.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. Solidarity.
Thank you for having me, and my love and solidarity to all my brothers and sisters in the labor movement and out on the West Coast, and all my friends that I've met out there singing out there. I
We
love
love
you.
doing Labor Fest. I mean, that's another thing. The unions could have a Labor Fest in every community in this country and all over the world of celebrating the workers of that community who built those communities, who struggle to survive in the face of AI, in the face of racism, in the face of the attacks that working people face, privatization, outsourcing. These attacks are escalating actually against the working class.
And they're going to keep escalating, and they're going to keep grinding us down until we draw the line. And draw the line means standing together.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, brother.